This is Chuck Oliver. Welcome to this week's Hidden Wealth Solution Review. Well, I want to talk to you about the rules of retirement and why the top two rules of retirement, are absolutely imperative with the turmoil that's being caused around our markets and taxes. See, taxes aren't a sure thing as far as extending the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. Barely made it through the House. Major issues already in the Senate because it's raising our deficit, right? It's actually raising the debt ceiling $5 trillion, and many are against that in the Senate. I'm against that. But at the same time, it's continuing this deficit spending. And the challenge is if we don't get the turmoil of these tariffs turned around, that's where a lot of what Trump calls the external revenue service, not just the internal revenue service, that's where a lot of this is going to be used to offset the extension of these Tax Cut and Jobs Act being kept ideally permanent in his one big beautiful bill. But the Senate's not going to have it. And they want debt removed. They don't want this, increase to the debt ceiling of $5 trillion. And right now, many nonpartisan, right, the Congressional Budget Office is projecting now $3.8 trillion of added deficit over the next 10 years. But that's with this year being at about $2.2 trillion of deficit spending and about $2 trillion plus going forward, especially with the unknown of what interest rates are going to do. Now let's talk about the markets and these tariffs. At the end of this week, right, China basically reneged on the 90-day kind of reprieve agreement that they agreed on that they would work through. And then sometime after July, starting in July, or August, they would sit back down and kind of renegotiate, right, somewhere around July. Well, that put the markets obviously into turmoil because of the uncertainty of tariffs with China. The question becomes, the two rules of retirement are, number one, first rule, right, accumulate enough savings, right, that you can retire on. And number two rule of retirement is make sure that savings is sustainable in a plan, a process, a system, that you have a system to be able to draw off of that. Now listen to this. You do not rise to the level of your goals, but you fall to the level of your systems. Again, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your system. So here's the question. Do you have a system, right? A system is a very simple acronym. Save yourself time, energy, and money. And for many of you that have said, you know what, Chuck, when you ask that question, which I'll ask you again, do you have a portfolio or do you have a plan? Many of you have reached out and said, you know what, I've got a portfolio. In fact, some of you are saying, I've got multiple portfolios. I want simplicity. I think of a client that we just helped through his retirement roadmap, wealth optimization blueprint. And he said, you know what, things are simpler. You guys have simplified things for me. And I'm going to give you an example. This particular client we just met with is able to lower the risk that if the market lost today, she would lose over 30%. I mean, if there was a major market downturn, she'd lose over 30%. That person was only averaging about 6% return, which is barely over inflation if we're being real about inflation. She is being proactive, right? She's saying, look, I know I can't retire right now, or I'm not looking to retire right now, but I want to get out in front of this because I see a lot of people, unfortunately, not doing that. We were able to, based on her preferred risk, lower the risk down to not exposing more than 10%, but instead of a 6%, getting over a 10%, actually a little bit over an 11% return. So basically cutting the risk in more than half and almost doubling the return, folks, but doing it tax-free. So I'm going to teach this Tuesday at retirementprotected.com. That's retirementprotected.com. Strategies that we're using deductions that will help you offset the Roth conversion taxes. And you don't want to wait, folks. This isn't the time to be sitting on the sideline. And at the same time, how, like this particular client, she created simplicity in her life. The ability to have more return with less risk and do it tax-free. Now, she also learned how to have upside with no downside. I'll teach you a lot of those different things that have changed retirement. And for those that register and attend, I want to gift you the book, The New Holistic Retirement. So again, for those that register and attend for my complimentary educational log on and learn webinar, that you will not be sorry, folks. The feedback has been very positive, not only from that, but also from the book. I want to gift you that book because it talks about how retirement has changed. And you having an accumulation plan in a distribution phase is not going to work. It's not sustainable. And I think about the article that I address on the radio program this weekend, and it talks about in a recent poll of retirees, only 4%, so think of that, only 4 out of 100 said that they were living the dream, right? Everything's good. 15% admitted struggling, literally struggling. Some thinking about having to go back to work, having to figure out a way to live on less. That's no way to obviously build retirement. In about 63% of those, the consensus, almost 2/3, was that they had wished that they did more formal planning. See, we don't rise to the level of our goals, folks. We fall to the level of our system. And if you don't have a retirement system to make sure that you hit both retirement rules, right? Accumulating enough, but being able to sustain throughout, that's the key. Go to retirementprotected.com. That's retirementprotected.com. Let me give you some proven strategies with a track record of measurable results so you can avoid this uncertainty, right? This turmoil around markets and taxes due to these tariffs. And protect yourself, folks. Retirementprotected.com, retirementprotected.com.